Sue Jackson, Professor of Lifelong Learning and Gender at Birkbeck University of London and IAFOR's Interdisciplinary Programme Director for Education. Today I'm joined by Dr. Yvonne Masters of University of New England, Australia. Dr. Masters was a featured presenter at IAFOR's Education Conference in 2015. She gave an engaging presentation on the empowering of teachers in the classroom. Dr. Masters, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's wonderful to be here, Sue. Thank you for inviting me.
I'd really like to start by asking you to say a little bit more about the work that you do around professional classroom practice. I'm especially interested in your goal to empower teachers.
Certainly. Probably I should start by saying I've been a teacher for over 30 years before I became an academic. And one of the things that I really tried to teach teachers while I was principal was that we should never label children because words have so much power. And now I'm in a university and doing pre-service teacher education. I'm trying to do that as soon as they go into the classroom instead of from the schools. One of the things that is passion for me is that every child is an individual. They should never have a label, and that words can either help them or hurt them. And we may not mean to hurt them. And so I try to make it clear we have to consciously think about what our words are and how we use them. And because it's a first year subject, they come to me first up. They get it hammered into them. But they do take to it and don't realise very often that a word has different meanings for different cultures. And so, yeah, that's why I love doing what I'm doing.
And presumably some of that is about role modelling in the classroom.
Very much role modelling, because some of them, well, most of them now, they're not as old as I am, they come and they're used to SMS speak and how they email, and very much their language is truncated. And to actually say to them, you need to learn to speak properly. You can be informal with your students when it's right, but you don't truncate words, and you actually teach the right things, and that they are models for these young children in primary or even the older ones in secondary, which is where I taught. And that, you know, you can empower them by showing them that this is the way they can get ahead in the world, the students themselves. So very much that.
You spoke about empowering. As you know, the theme of the conference here in the Asian Conference on Education is about education, power and empowerment, and about transcending boundaries. I wonder if you could just say how you interpret that theme in relation to your own work.
In several ways. In my own work, I'm at a university. About 85% of our students are off campus. They never come into the campus, they do everything online. To empower those students, you have to work in different ways and transcend one of the biggest boundaries of online learning, which is distance and isolation. So for me, it was a wonderful theme. It just fitted, because a lot of my research has been about how to engage students who are never there and who need to feel part of a community, because of course everyone has researched that engagement is linked to presence and belonging. So that's how I interpret it. And what that means is a whole range of things depending on the students.
And questions of belonging are particularly troublesome, I think, when we think about students at a distance and what that means. How do you ensure that your students have a sense of belonging?
It's been really difficult, but my view is if you think of every student deserves your time, and you show by responding to them in a timely fashion, engaging in the activities you've given them, which I tend to do. I even offer synchronous tutorials if they have time. And they do send back to me and say, I actually feel as if I belong to this community, which is wonderful because they've got to build those communities in their classrooms. So hopefully I'm modelling it for them.
And that takes us on, I think, to questions around communication and issues of communication that I wanted to just pick up with you and follow through. Because your presentation at the conference thought very much about communication and either the empowering or the disempowering that teachers can do in the classroom. So could you just explore a little bit what that means both in your own classroom but for your students going into their classrooms?
Very much. What I would say is, in my classroom, we have groups of students. Some are international, non-English speaking background students, and I learnt myself in my presentation that some non-verbal communication has different meanings from what I thought it was, but I already knew words did, and that there are things you do and do not say. And so I try and teach my students to think about the words and who they are using it with. They tend to call each other nicknames, which can be derogatory, and in Australia just about everybody has a nickname. And it's not always just a shortening like Tim for Timothy. It's about features, or how fat you are, or how slim you are, or how old you are. And I actually model in my classroom that we will all call each other by our first names. Things like Tim are fine, but we don't use nicknames even if they are the best friends. And they use their names of my name, I use theirs. With the off-campus students, I always, when I acknowledge them, thank you, sir, that was an insightful comment. Have you considered? And that's when I do the challenging. Because one of the biggest things I found as a teacher was you had so much less trouble with any kind of disciplinary issue if you knew the names of your students as quickly as possible, preferably in the first 24 hours. And also you need to be able to communicate as teachers with parents and your peers, and so that's why I talk that words can empower. And you may remember that sometimes a word means one thing to one person, but then when you say it in a different way, it means something totally different. And that's what I try and sort of instill, because it's professional classroom practice, and I insist that this is professional language that you need to use. There's a time and place for other kinds, but it's not in their classroom.
And are you able to give an example of a word that has different meanings in different contexts?
Well, lots of them. But the one I always think of, and it wasn't until someone used it to a male who I was with, and that's girl. I'm a girl, well, a woman now, but I am a girl, you are a girl, and it seems a neutral word. In Australia, I know it's used elsewhere, but in Australia in particular, it was used at a cricket match. And this was a professional cricket match, and someone said, oh, he bowls and bats like a girl. Now, the cricketer got upset because he felt being likened to a girl was insulting to him. I got upset because I want to know what's wrong with running and throwing like a girl. There's nothing, and so it was putting down girls and putting down men. And so that's just one word that people wouldn't necessarily think of. And also when you have words like I used in the presentation, where there's nothing wrong with being a winner, but where there's winners, there's losers. And do we, if we keep telling the same child in a classroom, you're the winner, give a subliminal message to everybody else and you're the losers? So I do this, and I actually put a line down my classroom when I'm on campus and have them move side to side. And they come up with their own words, because there's other words in Australian slang that I didn't use here because of the international and intercultural sense, but that they do use, and I use some of those as well.
Okay, thank you. Something that you didn't focus on very much in your presentation, but which really fascinates me because I know something of your work, is your work around virtual worlds. And maybe because I don't know very much about it, I'd love to know a little bit more now. So could you just pull it out a little bit for us?
I will do. I actually spoke about virtual worlds at my first conference here. That was the transformative learning spaces
Yes.
conference, and it fitted what I was doing. Because of the online students, and you can tell that's a big focus of what I do, and including them, was how can we give them a sense of presence? And a colleague of mine used virtual worlds. At the time, I was actually the Director of Professional Experience, so the prac coordinator, really. And the online students would go straight into a school. They never had the preparation and practice that on campus did. And I said, is there a way to build a virtual world school? And we were using Second Life, which is one of the virtual worlds and probably the biggest. I went in after I'd heard about it, had an avatar, had a name, don't know where one went. I was just looking, I lost it. But then we got a very small research grant from the School of Education to, first of all, test whether students were engaged if they came into a virtual world. And I offered tutorials in Second Life. I had about 50 students who all came in, and I have the tapes of that and the discussions. And what became interesting was the performance of those students was higher than the performance of the general student population. And we did it over 3 years, and it was the same. So we felt, well, it wasn't just this first group who it was wonderful. And we did role plays, so they learned how to do De Bono 6 hats. And they had the hats, and they put them on and talk about it. And then we got a very large grant from what was then the Australian Learning and Teaching Council. It's changed its name several times. But we got $200,000 to get a team from several universities. And my colleague Sue built the classrooms. But we've also started to get little bots, they're called in Second Life, who can be programmed. And if one of our pre-service teachers goes in as the teacher avatar and ignores the child, they're all primary in this one because that's where we were testing it, if they don't use the name of the bot or go close to the bot or anything for a certain length of time, that bot starts to be naughty. And just by moving close, the bot will stop. And so we're hoping they begin to pick up, and we do. We have what's called machinima, which are little videos that we made where we were the avatars, and I had great fun being a naughty child. But we have these little machinima with sets of questions and what could have been done, so we were hoping to prepare the online students. We've even moved beyond that. I still do virtual world tutorials, but we've moved now, we've got a new grant, and in New South Wales in particular, virtual schools are beginning, which is for the rural, regional, remote students who it's all taught, similar to this video, but into the classroom, and you need different skills. And nobody's been teaching, any pre-service teacher, how to teach in an online environment. So we've got a grant to actually develop resources, and we're supposed to finish by the end of the year, and hope we will. So yeah, again, it's for isolated distance students, whether it's in real virtual schools for real children or my online students. But I love it.
So people listening to this think that sounds a great idea. How would you recommend they might get started?
We do have, for the professional experience one, there's something called Virtual Prex, so Virtual Prex, and it's virtualprex.com is a website. They could have a look. There are instructions about machinima, those kinds of things. It's a commitment because you've got to be in there and using it, and it does take some time. But I was trained for an hour and then ran 5 tutorials with students, but I did have Sue with me when something went wrong. But we showed that someone who's never done it can pick it up very quickly. And one of the big things is to want to do it, because I lost my first avatar because I was just looking. I didn't have a purpose. So you need a purpose. It's not just something let's play in there because it's fun. It is fun, but you've got to know what you want and why you want it. But if you were going to do it, I'd start with Second Life, because there's a lot of ready-made places. doesn't cost, and you can go and meet there. And I mean, I'd be happy for anyone to contact me if they ever wanted to. UNE's website would have my email, and I'd be happy to talk to them.
Fantastic, that sounds like a wonderful offer, thank you. You mentioned that you gave a presentation previously at an IAFOR conference on that, and I think that's where I first heard you describe some of this work. So you're clearly a repeat attendee at IAFOR, and what brings you back? What is it that you most appreciate about IAFOR conferences?
That's an interesting question. I mean, this is my 4th year in a row now here in Japan, and I know there are IAFOR conferences in other places. I probably come here because of the time, but when I did come, it was serendipitous. It was the right theme. I had a bit of money that had to be spent by the end of the year. Never had actually said I wanted to go to Japan in my life, and came. I fell in love with Japan for a start, but I really like the IAFOR conferences, and one day I might like to try one of the others. But the ACE is where I work, it's education. But it is, as Joe explained today in one of his talks, that it is interdisciplinary, it's international, and it's intercultural. And as I said earlier, I learned quite a bit at my own presentation workshop about something intercultural that I did not know. And I mean, it probably reflects badly on me. I went to one not last night, but late afternoon, where someone from Mexico was talking about the indigenous tribes in Mexico. I didn't know there were any indigenous tribes in Mexico. So you learn so much more, and you find education is the same everywhere, and it is totally different everywhere. And I love going back and trying new things. Everyone's friendly. I've never had a problem finding sessions to go to, and often I've gone to them deliberately that are not about pre-service teacher education, and they've been really interesting. I'd recommend it to anyone, and have been telling people since I came, you've got to go to IAFOR.
Excellent, thank you. So, Dr. Masters, thank you so much for sitting down and spending the time to talk to us today about some of your experiences, which we really value learning more about. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
So thank you very much to everyone who's also listening to this at home and for watching this video. Please do visit IAFOR.org to learn more about IAFOR, about our conferences and events, and to see when our next conferences on education are going to be held so that you can join us at a future date. Thank you for watching.